When it comes down to persist your user's data in the application, then usage of the database is a straightforward choice. But sometimes such persistence is not possible due to your application being offline, or because maybe your user is unauthenticated and it's not very wise to persist data coming from unauthenticated users into your database. And sometimes it could be data that makes sense to persist just for the application but not in the database. And the browsers gives us 3 ways to store the data. It's local storage, session storage, and IndexedDB. In my application that I have mentioned in a couple of previous videos, I don't really have an offline support, but what I do have is that I have users that do not want to be authenticated, yet I want to give them the maximum comfort of using the website. So their data should be persisted in the browser. So what should I choose? Local storage, session storage, or IndexedDB? So local storage and session storage, they're practically the same. They're just key value pairs of strings. The only difference between them is that the session storage will expire when the tab will be closed, and the local storage will exist indefinitely. And because both key and value are strings, the value needs to be serializable. So it's okay for primitive values, but it's less fun when you're dealing with objects. Let's say here I have a data that represents user Dex. So in order to put it into local storage, it needs to be serialized. Right now, I have put it just like that. So I get object, which is not what I wanted. So what should I have done instead? I should have stringified that data, and now it's stored correctly. But in order to work with this data, I need to deserialize it every time I want to change it. And then I would need to serialize it back. So it's not the great developer experience, in my opinion. And I was neglecting using IndexedDB for the simple reason is that its interface is very cumbersome. So typical usage of IndexedDB, which represents a collection of object stores, which you can see that object stores is like a table. So we need to give a name for our database. That will be the database name. It will be like one instance inside the IndexedDB. And then each object storage will be like a table inside. So then we need to create a request to open that database, and we need to specify a version. If the version has changed from the one that browser knows about, and it always starts from version 0. So if you put a version 1, browser will understand that something has changed with your database since version has changed. The version is how you communicate to the browser that your schema has changed. So when the version has changed, an onUpgrade needed event will be fired from that request. And in the event handler for that event, you can alter your schema according to your needs. But normally you would create an object store. You would specify what would be a primary key. You either need to pick unique property in the object you're trying to store, or you can use an auto increment that will behave like a normal database. It will be auto-incrementing number. You can also create indexes to make search faster. And when the modifications to the object store have been completed, and you can listen to it through object store transaction on complete event, you can finally start putting in some data. Also, you can put data in the onSuccess event that will be fired after an onUpgrade event if needed has happened. I don't know about you, but I am spoiled React developer. I don't want my life to be complicated. I want it to be easy and simple. So another popular alternative way to work with IndexedDB is through usage of the very tiny library created by magnificent Jake Archibald called IndexedDB Promised that basically implements a slightly better interface, and that will be a perfect choice for a lot of you, I guess. But for my website, I have picked a library called Dexie.js, and Dexie.js, like they say, a minimalistic wrapper for IndexedDB, but in reality, it's such a powerful wrapper with so many different functionalities and really cool API. So we can see here that I import from DexieDB. I give a name for my database. Then, because I want to use a TypeScript and I want to have TypeScript support, I need to kind of help Dexie to understand what my schema looks like. So I have only one table or object store, which is anonymous Dex, because I use it only when the users, as I said, whenever the users are not authenticated. And then in the constructor, I just call Dexie version. Whenever you alter the object representing the schema of your stores, it's good advice to bump up a version to the next number. And then you can describe your stores in this just beautiful, simple string that just mentions all the column that will exist there. And I use auto increment, and Dexie provides this nice little quick syntax for it to easily define that primary key. Then I have defined 3 convenience hooks that basically return me a function to work with the database. When I have a user, I will use SaveUserDAC, which will be a wrapper around fetch, or Axios in my case, to persist user DAC into the real database. But if the user is not authenticated, then I return a function that will utilize DexieDB to persist it in the browser in the IndexedDB. So here we see this database I have, this IndexedDB database, which has an index table or object storage. So as soon as I save some kind of DAC, it will be visible in the user's DACs, but also if I refresh the IndexedDB table, an index table, the DAC will be there. And thanks to Dexie API, if I need it, I can look up very easily in the IndexedDB. The even better choice would be probably not to use an auto-increment index, but instead use DAC ID. Of course, that would be a smart choice, but that code was written more than 3 years ago, so we're not always perfect. If you need to persist some kind of information in the browser and you feel limited with just simple string values of the local storage or session storage, I really encourage you to give IndexedDB a try, read the documentation, and try either DexieDB or Jake Archibald's wrapper. And don't be like me, don't be scared by complexity of IndexedDB documentation, and just use them. It's super easy and super straightforward as long as you use the good libraries. Thank you for watching, and until next time.